Right, you have already mentioned the so-called Tea Party movement. Is this a real conservative movement of disappointed Americans that has to be taken seriously, political-wise?
Well, they're not organized. They don't have a platform. So it's possible that some political person could come along as a lightning rod and sort of galvanize a leadership out of a very loose coalition. However, in my view, it's mostly just an expression of social anger. And the long-term trend in mood turned down in 2000. It rebounded into 2007 and is now down from that point. So it's beginning to snowball, get larger and larger. While we are in the current rally, however, it's going to be very muted. So we won't really see unrest until later this year when the trend of the stock market turns back down, and that's when people are going to get extremely angry and they will start expressing it even more violently.
Okay, talking about the housing market, isn't it the case that government-sponsored entities such as Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac caused a great part of the housing crash? What do you think?
They caused the whole overvaluation of real estate throughout the country. When the government formed the Federal Home Loan Banks and Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and Ginnie Mae, they were all machines to talk everyday Americans into becoming debtors nearly for life. They said, you can't buy a house for cash anymore. You'll have to borrow the money. And we're going to make it easy to do. Well, of course, the easier they made it to borrow money, the higher the prices went, reflecting that virtually free money. And the higher the prices went, the more people had to borrow in order to afford a place to live. So it was a self-sustaining spiral that finally peaked in the year 2005 nationwide, where no one could afford a house anymore. The average down payment was zero. So the creditors were lending to people who were literally broke and hadn't even the money for closing costs. That was the limit. And from that point, just as happened in Japan in 1989, we've been in a downward contracting price spiral in real estate. And it doesn't matter how many programs the government puts in place, the prices of homes are going to continue to fall probably throughout the entire decade, with a few periods of slight rebound such as we're in now, but these are just stair steps on the way down.
Yeah, I think many experts, such as David Rosenberg or Meredith Whitney, predict a double-dip recession for the housing markets. Wouldn't you call that definitely deflationary when the real estate prices go down by another 15 to 20%? And what does it mean for the overall economy, for the US economy?
I think double dip is too mild a term. We've only begun the decline in real estate prices, and it's the next leg down is going to be a bigger drop than what we've already had. It will not be a double bottom, and that won't be a W recession. It's a depression. And by the time we finally make the low in this depression, it will be a V bottom, just as it was in early 1933. But we're not even close to that bottom. So I think real estate is going to go down at least 50 to 80% from its current level. Forget where it started from. And people who think that is, too severe of an outlook should go back and study the early 1930s. Many mansions were being sold for the taxes owed at that time, and that means they were down between 95 and 99% in value. It wasn't across the board, but many properties were available at that kind of discount. So that's what we're heading into when all of this debt disappears and the IOUs become wallpaper. The people who owe the money say, I cannot pay anymore, I can't even pay any interest. That's when the people who thought that they had $500,000 or $1 million or $10 million worth of value and realize they have none are going to severely change their buying habits. So it's a process. It's taking its time. I think it's lulling people into complacency once again. But the next leg down is one people absolutely must avoid. That's why I put out a second edition of Conquer the Crash recently, because I felt so strongly that this is people's last chance to get their houses in order, to get out of debt, to get out of all the traditional investments. stocks, bonds, real estate, everything down the line, even commodities, and get into the safest possible cash equivalents they can.
Okay. The housing and building industry used to be the job-driving sectors after recessions in the past. Today we observe a very different picture. Do you see any job drivers in the near term? In which sectors could the American economy add jobs in the future? Are there any?
The only sector that's been adding jobs is the government sector. The only way government can add jobs is to take money from people who are actually producing something. Every dollar they take from a producer, they hurt jobs elsewhere. So it's impossible for government to add any jobs total. And that's one of the reasons why, even though it created this $1 trillion stimulus package a year ago, employment has continued to fall, even though GDP has risen, because they're destroying jobs faster than they're creating them. There is no corner of the economy that's going to create new jobs except on a relative basis. Absolute jobs are not going to rise, but some areas, such as foreclosure, legal services, have gone way up, even repossessions. So you have to look for your pockets where you could find a job, but there's no policy the government could use to create jobs except to cancel taxes and shut down. That would help everybody a lot, but of course they're not going to do that.
Okay, so Mr. Bernanke didn't see a nationwide housing crash coming. Do you think that he is the right person to find a way out of this economic mess?
No one can find a way out. There's no such person.
Okay, so some people say it's better to abolish the Fed, yeah, get rid of it, and send Bernanke back to the university. What do you personally think about him? Are people too harsh with him, or
Well,
are they
I
right?
won't really discuss Bernanke, but I will discuss the Fed, a monopoly central bank which outlaws real money is an abomination that should never have been created. And the people who understood what it meant said at the time what the ultimate result would be. Massive inflation, complete manipulation of the money supply, and that's exactly what we have. So the best thing would be to eliminate the Fed and take away from the federal government any and all money printing abilities. I'm not holding my breath waiting for it, but I think part of the social unrest that we discussed earlier could well be aimed at getting rid of the central bank.
Okay, so there's definitely no way, yeah, or any chance to spend your way out of a recession.
No, because all spending requires, government spending anyway, requires taking it from someone else, either savers or taxpayers. They either steal it by inflation from the savers or they take it by statute from the taxpayers. So they cannot create anything useful net. And the people that originally held the money, the taxpayers and the savers, would be spending in areas that would actually help the economy. They'd spend it much more wisely. Government simply wastes it all and throws it in areas that no one would ever support otherwise. So even the spending it manages to create usually supports areas of the economy that should not be supported. So every dollar of so-called stimulus is really the opposite. It's a dollar that hurts the economy.
Okay, so when you think about companies such as General Motors, Chrysler, or GMAC, they once used to be market giants that are now on the way of shrinking their businesses heavily. What went wrong in the past that made them lose their positions as the market leaders within their industries?
What went wrong was the government supported Chrysler when they should have let it go under way back in the 70s.
Right, so
If they had let Chrysler go under, we'd have had only two American car companies. They would have been larger and healthier.
hmm, so
That's probably the biggest thing that went wrong. And the other one was that the government supported the union so strongly that the car companies were forced to create contracts and pensions with unions, which of course, and unions of course feather bed everything, and much of the cost of a car goes to pay the union contracts and the benefits promised.